Welcome to the Media Casters with your business besties, Corinna and Julie Loken. In every episode, you'll get behind-the-scenes access to experts who share their struggles and successes in podcasting, publishing, and presenting. So grab a pen, grab your bestie, and kick it with Corinna and Jules.
Well, Jules, what do we have in store today?
We got something in store. We have the historian, or the OG, the original gangster of radio and podcasting, John J. Wiley.
John J. Wiley. What
Rolls
is
off
his
the tongue.
podcast show called? He has a podcast and radio show.
John J. Wiley, or as we like to call him Jay, because only his family and closest friends call him Jay, has a podcast called Law Enforcement Today. Law Enforcement Today. Amazing stories of trauma, of first responders, of people that have experienced things that nobody really wants to experience.
Well, and he's doing things a little differently, even as he's had success now in this whole podcasting world and the broadcasting world through terrestrial radio and over 81 markets around the United States. He has actually decided to help others in the community of that first responder
Mhm.
world get their voices heard as well, because he has that Law Enforcement Today podcast network that anybody can join if they have a law enforcement related podcast. So we'll be talking about that with him a little bit as well. And I'm
Mhm.
just so impressed with everything that I've learned from him thus far, from listening to his show. I know that we'll get into things like cutting through the white noise, the
Mhm.
kind of BS that we all
The
hear when we're
BS. He is like the BS barometer, meaning everybody today is everybody today is bombarded with being sold things like instant gratification, that you can have a number one podcast, that you can have a number one best-selling book, that I can make you $1,000,000 in 6 months. It's all BS. People, that's not how businesses are run.
right. That's
And
not how they're built.
no, it's built on grit, it's built on resilience, ingenuity, and thinking outside the box, and putting in your time.
And leveraging your assets
Mhm.
and leaning into discovering where opportunities exist and then working to amplify them however you can. I mean, those are all things that we know through the hard work of creating and producing our own efforts in podcasting and blogging and things along those lines,
Mhm.
writing books, whatever it is that you're out
Right.
there doing. It doesn't happen overnight. Overnight success stories, those are the unicorns. But even those overnight success stories, guess what? A lot of work went in to that person's success. It's not something that happens solo. We lean into these ideas of these stories that, oh, it's just magically happened that Oprah became Oprah, or it magically happened
Oh,
that Joe
right.
Rogan became Joe Rogan. I mean, these are individuals who put in a lot of time, effort, and energy into their stories, and they put them out into the world time and again, time and again, time and again in an architected manner to build a path towards
Mhm.
success. And so these are the sorts of things that we're going to be talking about with John today.
Right, and we all have Oprah dreams. Fun fact, he was interviewed by Oprah back in the day. Oprah,
I can't
please,
believe it.
if you're listening, rate, review, and subscribe, because it's
Yes.
all about our mindset. But truly, I think he knows the path of hard work, and he is creating a life, or he has created a life and an income to support himself and his family simply on podcasting and radio. So what we're gonna listen to, what we are about to hear, is his path, and I'm gonna be taking notes because he's done it, and he hasn't taken any shortcuts. Don't you ever think, like, don't you ever just wanna wake up, Karina, and you look at an Instagram account or a blog or one of your podcasts and it goes viral? Like, I dream of that, but I mean, how often does it happen?
Well, and the reality is there is a secret sauce to helping a post go viral as well. And guess what? It
Mhm.
includes advertising dollars. And
Right.
so the reality is, even those things that you see go viral, they don't go viral usually
Mhm.
by purely organic means. I mean,
Mhm.
you'll see the ocean spray TikTok example as a one in a trillion example.
No
But,
idea what you're talking about,
oh, you
ocean
don't? Yeah.
spray.
Anyway, so,
I don't have
it
a
was
TikTok account.
all right. Well, it went viral in media, and those who do know will,
Wow.
you know, they'll know what I'm talking about. But it was basically a gentleman skateboarding to work, drinking ocean spray,
Oh,
and
wait, I
listening to
know
music.
this. My
Yes.
son showed it to me,
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
so
See,
I know.
everybody, once you
Mhm.
kind of get into it, when these things have truly gone viral, almost everyone has seen it. Now, that was an example of a purely organic post that went viral, but
Mhm.
it's newsworthy because it was really purely organic. Most of
Mhm.
what we hear about today, it isn't that way. It's what they do is they look at what topics are trending, they choose the specific hashtags, they create a video that they think could possibly go viral, and then they put money behind it and they
Mhm.
advertise the heck out of it.
Mhm.
Because if they do all of those things in concert, then they're going to be able to be more likely to hit the millions of views as opposed to just the few and reach beyond the paid advertising to that viral advertising.
Mhm.
And so, or not even advertising, just viral exposure.
And to get discovered is almost impossible. Just throwing something out there on your RSS feed and expecting to receive the accolades that you dream of, those Oprah dreams, almost impossible. Almost impossible. It is about being very discerning in where you share all your brand, everything that is your brand. It is about being discerning where you upload your RSS feed. It is about being discerning with your marketing dollars. And people want that instant gratification, and we're gonna squash those dreams today. We're squashing your Oprah dreams today, right, Karina? I'm sorry,
Well,
I'm
but
like a naysayer.
it's not necessarily even just that. It's actually just approaching it with a bit of realism and helping
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
understand that it takes work to get there. It's not something that you can expect to happen overnight like magic. You're not going
Mhm.
to wake up one morning, go look at your RSS feed performance and
Mhm.
see that you have millions of downloads that just happen to occur while you slept. It takes work.
Yeah.
And it takes effort and it takes consistency and it takes showing up and it takes having great, compelling guests and interviews with people just like John J. Wiley about
John
his
Jay.
podcast, right?
Mhm. Yeah, he's an amazing guest, and there is this alphabet soup of everything that you're doing, but listening to someone, a historian, if you will, John J. Wiley, his experience, his path, take notes, understand, get inspired, but take inspired action and don't rely on instant gratification. Don't rely on social media. I'm saying it. Sorry, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Probably get shut down here, Karina, from me saying it, but
We'll get gray listed.
gray listed. Why not? Well, if we do, we do. But we are
Yes.
speaking our truth, aren't we? Because
Yes.
we're the media casters.
And for those of you who are listening to this, stick around towards the end because we have a bit of a surprise for you. We're inviting John J. Wiley to be a part of something that we haven't even told you guys about yet. So please stick around towards the end and you'll get that news. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you might even spot a surprise or two on the video.
Karina, do you know everything? I feel like, what don't you know? You're such a tease.
I might be a pod teaser. Let's kick it, Jules.
Let's kick it, girl.
So let's introduce our guest, Jules.
We have got, and when I talk to him on Clubhouse, I always think of him as the OG of everything radio and podcasting because he has been around for, and John, you're very young, by the way, so I don't want
No.
to make it sound like you've been around for centuries, but you've seen that evolution of being a radio broadcaster to what the heck is podcasting to harnessing all these different mediums, which I loved immediately. And you are always giving such good advice. And I think it's because you have a retrospective and history in this profession.
What I try to do is just go with what I've experienced and what's been taught to me. I've had very good teachers along the way. I've had program directors in radio that have given me instructions. I've had instructors at broadcasting school give me instructions and lessons I've learned along the way. Now, one of the things being older, I remember when AM radio dominated, there was no such thing as FM. And then FM came along and they couldn't get advertisers. So they would play whole album sides. So what we now call classic rock back then was album oriented rock. And it was done out of necessity. So you play the entire one side of Led Zeppelin, then the jock would talk for a minute and flip the album and then turn it back on, play it back on because they couldn't get advertisers because no one knew what FM was.
I would
So
be
now
alive
you
during
go
this.
into now you go into
What is AM
podcasting.
though? What's AM? And what does it stand for?
Modulation.
Right.
What's AM stand for, Brian? Amplitude modulation.
Did not know that. Learned something today.
Yeah. So it was here's what I used to do. When we were kids, we didn't have televisions in our bedrooms. We had a radio. And quite often we had little kits where you make your own AM radio. And what we do at night with the AM stations is listen to faraway stations. I was in Norfolk, Virginia. We listened to Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, because the signal would carry tremendously at night. And they play the same music as the stations here locally, but it was so fascinating to hear the personalities and what they're talking about. And you envision in your mind as an 8-year-old what it's like to be in Boston. And you did this from your bedroom. So that's where my love affair of radio really started.
I love that idea of you just being an 8-year-old kid and just putting all your attention onto this, like, little transistor radio, if you will, and then taking your love and making it into something that has been your lifelong career.
Yeah, I was in police work for a long time, then got hurt and retired young, and began pursuing a career in broadcasting. And the way it started, Julie and Corinna, is back in the early days of Cool Edit, not Adobe Edition, Cool Edit. I'd take an RE20 microphone I had that I bought used. I'd record a talk show. It was called Biker Bros. And I'd load the MP3 file up on a website and put a download MP3 script in. People would listen from other places. And I was fascinated that we had people in Australia listening. And then I went to, which a lot of people can do, I went to a brokered radio station in Palm Beach County, and I bought my own time and then sold my own advertising. So I did a 2-hour show on Saturdays. That was called Biker Talk Radio, and it was all about the motorcycle lifestyle and events and travel, all kind of mixed in. And I fell in love with radio. And then I went to night school for broadcasting, and I've been working full time as an FM music jock for about 18 years. And then took what I learned from the radio world, formatics wise, delivery, really being listener centric focused, one-on-one conversations, theater of the mind, those sort of things, and combined it with my law enforcement experience and created a podcast called Law Enforcement Today. And the reason it's called that is I partnered with someone at a really big Facebook page. It's time about 630,000 people. And I got in front of his audience much, much quicker than it taken me to get my own. And that's how their radio station heard an episode. And that's where it all began.
So it's like working at this intersection of your experience in two very different worlds, but harnessing it all together. So my friend Liza Miller, she has a garage in Santa Cruz that she opens up to people to allow them to come and work on their bikes in person every Sunday, right? And so she also started a podcast with these people called Motorcycles and Misfits. It now gets more than 5,000 downloads per episode, which is pretty big for such a super niche podcast, right? And she's had really famous people on as well, including Norman. I'm forgetting his last name. He's a star on the Walking Dead TV show that's really into
Oh, yeah.
motorcycles. So she brought him on for her 400th episode. So to give you an idea, she's many, many episodes in. But she's just got such a good, warm heart and is all about building podcaster community and really doesn't even seek advertisers, isn't or hasn't taken the leap to take it to terrestrial radio when she absolutely could. So I would love to talk about
I
that,
would
talk
love
about
to
what
meet
it
her.
takes.
Well, first of all, I thought when you mentioned that, there's a video blogger, goes by the name of Supercar Blondie. And you need to check this lady out. And when she started a show about exotic and high performance cars, and from a novice's standpoint of view, not an expert, designed for people to view it. People like me that can't afford a Ferrari, can't afford a Lamborghini or one of those. And look at the kind of numbers she's generating and the kind of money that she and her husband have created out of this show. And what they do is they took a niche idea and made it accessible and attractive to a larger audience, but they never left their format. So look up Supercar Blondie, and she is making mega millions. I'll put it that way. She is absolutely huge in the YouTube world and also all kinds of video outlets.
That's very cool. So I wanted to dig a little deeper into how your current podcast got started. I've listened to a couple of recent episodes and have really enjoyed the conversations you're hosting there. The last two or the two latest were both with authors or cops who have become authors, people who work in tobacco, what do you call it?
Oh, ATF, the
ATF.
ATF agent. Yeah.
Yeah, the ATF agent, and then the the cop from Brooklyn who was working a beat, basically murder cases and
Right.
homicide for many, many years. And you really get into their minds and their mindsets and the things that they were going through, how they were thinking, their lives and how they've changed since leaving the force. And ultimately, it's like this deep perspective that's almost psychological profiling in a way. And so I would love to just talk about first how you got there. What made you decide to host a show that kind of is in this vein? And also, using that Facebook group to grow an audience really quickly, enabling you to go to terrestrial radio also. Like, what does that journey look like? And do you think it's possible for somebody who has a podcast without that kind of a deep following to follow the same sort of tune and take their podcast to a terrestrial space?
And what is terrestrial?
The AM
AM/FM.
FM radio.
Right.
And some people now include like Sirius XM in that realm as well. It's a little bit different beast, but yes, anybody can do it. I'm not a special case. What if I go back to the what I want to do, and there's practical reasons why, and then there's the creative reasons of what I want to do. So I'll cover the practical first. I've worked at radio stations where I've been the only person at that station. Everybody else is a network jock. No one's there. They're all doing their shows from home. And one person's in Kansas, one's in Texas, one's in San Francisco, whatever. They record their bits and it gets merged in and they're done. So most of them never see that station. And the last station I was at, besides the one now in the Keys, I was told, you're the face of the station. It's your baby. You make it or you break it. So every concert, whatever's going on around town, it was me. Here's the thing with that. No matter how hard you work for a station, you're an employee. And when you grow this thing and you take a lot of pride in this thing for a lot of reasons, the day you quit, and I've never been fired from a radio job, I'm one of the exceptions, but the day you quit, you stop making money. You're no longer getting paid by those people. It doesn't matter if you put 17 years in building the station. I'm not saying it's a negative, it's business. You are done. You create a podcast. People are still listening to podcasts I did 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I still got downloads on the first episodes I did, and they're still generating revenue. And once that work is done, I never have to lift a finger to create something ever again. That intrigued me. So that's the business part of it. Let's talk about the creative part. What got me going was partly my own experience working in law enforcement without telling, because my show's not about me. It's about my guests. But I went through a really tough time with trauma and how it impacted my marriage and time with my children and my mental and emotional health. And I wanted to create a podcast for law enforcement officers, specifically their family members that were struggling. And the minute a radio station, and I know which episode it was that they listened to, there was an episode with a young lady named Stacy West, who was a young officer in Auburndale, Florida, and she was shot like 3 times with SKS rifle on a domestic disturbance call and almost killed. And the audio from the dispatcher was included in that episode. They heard it and said, we got to have this. What makes my show different is I tell radio stations we do for radio what Investigation Discovery does for television. So when you watch these shows, let's just say Homicide Hunter with my wife loves that show with Joe Kenda. And Joe Kenda is a retired police lieutenant, and he tells his stories. And I had him as a guest on the show, but he just talks like cops talk. And she goes, "I love this." I said, "He's talked like everybody I know." And I told him that in an interview I had on my show. I said, "Joe, you talk like everybody I know." And he goes, "The funny thing is, when I interviewed for him, said I'm not going to do an interview or an audition like you're used to. I'm going to tell you a story. You like it or you don't."
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do with our show. We focus on law enforcement officers. Either they're going to talk about investigating crime, an aspect you don't get to hear about. That's about 40% of our guests. The others are law enforcement officers, other first responders, firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, corrections officers, military, victims of crime, their spouses or survivors, talking about trauma they went through, how it impacted them personally, their lives, their relationships, things that are important, and what they did to build their lives afterwards. I don't use the term rebuild or recreate because there's before and there's after for a lot of these people. and I just let them tell their stories. There's
Mhm.
really no magic to it. I'm not an expert. I don't tend to be an expert. I don't pretend. I don't want to answer. Julie, like this, I don't give them a form to fill out. I don't do anything. I have an idea we're going to talk about, and that's it. We have a conversation, just like us three are having a conversation, and wherever it goes, it goes.
Well, John, you made a couple of comments, and I think this is 2 shows ago when you were talking to the ATF guy about his work undercover and how you had tried at one point to,
I was horrible at it.
go undercover. And so I think what does make the show work extra well, and I'm just going to say extra well, is that you do have enough experience having worked as a cop to really relate to these people and have real, raw, honest conversations with them. I did also note that you bleep the cuss words, and that's
Yep.
something you have to do for the
FCC.
terrestrial radio. But I wondered if you left that in on another version or somewhere else as bonus
No.
content or something like that. You
I
just
have a rule
automatically
of
bleep it
thumb.
out.
Number one, if Julie or you approach me and said you want to come on and you want to talk about a horrible part of your life, and a big part of this story is how we grow from that. And if you can take that and someone listens and goes, man, if they're going through that and they can overcome that, then I can make it through this. Well, when people get emotional, sometimes they say things they wish they hadn't said. So a lot of times I edit things out, but I always bleep out the curse words, number one for FCC and radio, because I'll get dropped in a heartbeat
Hmm.
or fired or fined or by the FCC, whatever it might be. The other one is I bleep out, and this is something that people think is weird. I bleep out brand names. So if someone says, I was at the Home Depot having a Coca-Cola, you're going to hear, I was at the bleep having a bleep, because they're not paying me to be on my show. It's about the person's story. It's not about these brand names. So believe me, and this is where the business part comes into it. You watch Yellowstone or something on television, you see a Dodge emblem on a truck. I guarantee you Dodge is paying for that. They don't get there for free. You watch
Yeah.
these other shows and you'll see a piece of black tape over a logo on a shirt. That's because they're not paying. The other thing I was going to say is that it's about the story. It's not about brands. It's not about details. And I tell all my guests, this isn't a 60 Minutes interview. There's no gotcha questions. If there's something you don't want to talk about, just say, "Hey, I can't talk about that," and we'll move on. We'll
Mhm.
we'll do something else because it's not live. It's recorded, which takes a lot of pressure off the people and me as well.
Yeah.
I love that, John, and the the things you've been mentioning, I'm hearing the word monetization a lot, and you've been doing this for such a long time. You were on the police force, retired, and then you honestly are doing what you love to do. Are you fully gaining an income from podcasting
Yes,
and being on the radio? Tell us,
yeah.
how do you do that?
The vast majority it comes from radio. I'll be honest with you. So you've heard me talk in Clubhouse and social audio rooms. I have a media kit. And I tell people the media kit is a moneymaker. And by the way, if you don't have one, if you're a podcaster and you don't have a media kit, you can borrow mine and use it as a guide for building yours. What I
Just put
show,
your picture on there and just change the name.
what I
Borrow
do
John's.
is I show a potential sponsor, and that's a term I like to use. I don't like to use advertisers, but I use the term sponsor. I show them they're going to get in front of X amount of people on social media. They're going to get X amount of people on radio, what the reach is on radio, and X amount of people on podcasts. And the reason I do that is because we are affected and approached by the CPM world for podcast advertising. CPM is not a bad deal. I say it all the time. CPM stands for costing podcasters money, but it's not a bad deal. It's a great way to get started. So your pre-roll ads on your, like mine is Omni Studio, the pre-rolls, that's CPM. That helps pay the bills. However, when I talk to sponsor, I just got a new premier sponsor and I'm working on getting them done. The main thing is, and I say, you're on 81 radio stations, broadcast at 24 million combined population. Then you're going to go on social media, and our total social media network, including groups, Twitter, Instagram, it's about 1.6 million. So you're going to get exposure on that as well. And you'll be on a podcast. And here's the magical part about podcasting. This is one of the reasons I tell people to stay away from a CPM conversation and stay away from numbers is when you pay for that ad, let's just say you do a month at a time or 3 months, 6 months, 2 years later down the road, you're still getting listens because your ad is baked in the show notes or in the audio. You're still getting listens and you're not paying for it. That's a huge plus for all advertisers. You can still continue to get reach even though you haven't paid any money. And if that post goes viral, guess what? You get in front of tens of thousands more people.
Well, I think everybody's all, when they're entering into podcasting or radio or writing a book or getting on stages or becoming an entrepreneur, everyone's looking for the pot at the end of the rainbow. And I'm sure it's taken you a while to get there.
Yes, lots and lots of work.
Mhm.
I posted a post earlier, and it's a line from the John Lennon song. And I think it goes something like, and I'm going to paraphrase the John Lennon song, Imagine. Some say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. So when it comes to radio and podcasts, I have big dreams. And I'll be honest with you, ladies, I'm shocked that I'm where I'm at today. I'm shocked that I'm on 81 radio stations. However, I still dream big. I want more. I want to be in front of a bigger audience because being in radio, I can drive traffic to my podcast. I can drive traffic to social media. I can drive traffic to email newsletter. I can drive traffic to websites. Those are all things. And there's things like data and other things you can do. When you listen to the top syndicated talk hosts on radio, they're all doing that, every one of them. So some of them are making millions of dollars a year on their podcast alone, making far more in a podcast than they do on the radio. However, radio is a great way to drive a lot of people to certain destinations. So when I say that I'm a dreamer, yeah, big dreams, but what a lot of people don't see is the amount of work it's taken. And I'll just say Facebook, for example. I post on all social media platforms. My main focus is Facebook and has been for 5 years since I've been doing this. I post 6 a.m. till midnight, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I schedule most stuff ahead of time. And on average, it's at once every hour and 10 minutes. So my wife says you're always on the phone. I'm always working. What people don't see is the amount of work it takes to get to where you're at and to maintain where you're at. The other thing is that Facebook platform becomes a revenue stream in and of itself, but it takes a lot of work. People that have big dreams are phenomenal. People that don't want to work for those dreams. What's the old saying about dream in one hand and you know what, and the other
Which
one, see which one fills up faster? Well, if you don't work hard, I hate to tell you, most people are not overnight successes. You're going to be disappointed.
Well, and that's why I think Tracy Hazzard, who's the CEO of Podetize, says that she considers any show that doesn't make it to 100 episodes as if it is pod faded. And I know that most pod fade by episode 7. And so that's just telling you something because it takes a while to establish that credibility and to establish that audience. It doesn't happen overnight. And
Mm-mm.
so people need to kind of be in it with a vision for the long haul in order, if they really do hope to turn it into something that can generate a revenue and build and build and build. Liza Miller, who I mentioned earlier, said to me when I got ready to launch my first podcast, you won't even know what you have until you reach your 100th episode. And
Mhm.
so I find that really interesting from very experienced podcasters or those that work in broadcast media, that they reflect on that 100 episode piece as a bit of a milestone, as something that you really need to kind of get past before you can even really ascertain what your success has been and what might need to change, if anything, or what you should lean into. So I wonder what your perspective is on that. Does it take 100 episodes?
Well, it depends. I think if you've been in radio for a while and you've had a lot of great teachers like I've had, you've got a head start. There's basic rules that you don't do. For example, you don't start off, you have a one-to-one conversation. And I remember being my first radio job, I felt like I was a lunatic talking in a closet by myself because everybody left the radio station at like 3 o'clock.
You and
And
us
it was just
both.
me. Yeah, so it's kind of weird. But I put a picture up of a woman in a station wagon with a little kid in the back seat behind her. And that's who I talked to. And the reason I did that was twofold. So I didn't feel like I was talking to myself, which you really are. But also, I never wanted to put her in a position where she had explained to this little kid what I said. So I didn't want to put her in an awkward position. What I'd rather do is make her smile, make her laugh. If I can make someone forget about their troubles for 2 minutes and laugh, then I've done something great. Or I can help you avoid a traffic jam. Now that's the radio world. So the podcasting, the reason I say that is you're going to have to it's a learning curve about the microphone, how to talk, how to have a conversation, how to have the one-on-one conversation, little tips and tricks you can do to be more efficient with your time and your listeners' time. How to engage theater of the mind, how to do things like that so that you are more productive. And it's going to take a while. So people, after about 6 or 7 episodes, if it's their first time behind a microphone, chances are, I hate to break it to you, you're going to suck. It's just going to be bad. But about 100 episodes down the road, you'll be amazed at how much better you sound, how much more comfortable you are, how much more proficient you are behind the microphone, how much better you are at having that conversation to a listener than you were in the beginning. And the only way you can tell that is by doing it.
Mhm. I think that speaks to everybody wanting instant gratification these days. Have you seen a change or in the different decades that you've been doing this, how people are performing?
Well, I'm not going to ask you ladies your age or your
Or
first job.
I'm old. I'm the oldest here. Karina's the
My,
second
Not yet.
oldest.
my
I
very
am the
first
oldest.
my very first job was delivering groceries at a grocery store, a mom and pop grocery store in Norfolk, Virginia at 14. And I was on a bicycle, and I was doing things you're not allowed to do. I was making sausage. So it was a Greek-owned family that had this, and I was thrilled to have that job because we grew up in a military family, and no one had money. No one I knew had money. So if you wanted Levi's, which I wanted desperately, and Converse sneakers, which were the thing to have back then, or Birdwell beach britches, you had to get a job. You had to get a job. You had to earn them because it wasn't coming under the tree. It just wasn't an option. So what I see nowadays, and I hate stereotypes and generalizations, but what I see nowadays, what I hear nowadays is that I want to be an overnight success. And what they
Mhm.
don't see is the years that the people put in work. And here's a great example: Oprah Winfrey. They don't come much bigger in the entertainment broadcasting space than Oprah Winfrey. A lot of people don't realize this, and I'm sure she forgot, but she interviewed me when I was a cop in Baltimore when she worked at when
Slow this
and
down. Slow this
she
down.
was the news anchor, one of the news anchors of WJZ 13 in Baltimore, and she interviewed me about a news story.
She remembers. I'm sure she remembers.
Thank you. So a few years later, and back then she was doing her job with maybe one producer, two producers. That was it. When they went on site to a call, for what, for lack of better words, like my interview, they had the video operator, the video camera operator, and her. That was it.
Mhm.
They had a little earpiece when we called in to do live broadcast, or they were doing a recorded bit, whatever it might be. Then when she started her syndicated show, you look what she did in the early days. Didn't have the staff she does now. It has it has grown tremendously. Now she's got her own network. She's a lot of other things. She's got a huge staff. She does things that I'm sure back in the 1980s when she interviewed me, she didn't realize she was going to be doing, but she dreamed and she worked her tail feathers off to get there. And that's what it requires: working hard to get there.
Right. That's exactly right.
And the layer of vulnerability that I so admire of Oprah Winfrey, sharing her story and not being bound to the facade of being someone that she wasn't. She was always authentically herself.
Yeah, she's always been her. That's the thing. And I think Corinna kind of hit on it when she said the interviews with people I have. When I've had guests on my show that I don't have a point of reference to, and I'll say that. Here's an example. I had a woman on whose college age son died by suicide. And I told people at the very beginning, a lot of our conversations are really tough. This one doesn't get any tougher. This one's tough as nails. And I had to tell her, I don't understand, but I know from being on scenes as a cop what I had to do. I know the emotional effects. I know what it's like to be 22, knocking on the door of someone's house and telling them their 23-year-old son was killed in a car accident. And you think at 22, you got it going on. Trust me, I had no idea what was going on at that point in my life. So I don't have a point of comparison, but I do have my unique experience. And that is, look, this is who I am. This is what I am. And you can take it or leave it. I'm not trying to impress anybody.
Right. Well, you bring that authenticity through. And I mean, I'm just going to keep listening to your show, even though, I'm not a beat cop. I've never been a cop. I thought about it for a little bit, for a hot minute, but
You're the podcast cop.
oh, sure. Julie
Blow
calls
the
me the
whistle.
boss.
You're out of line. No,
Yeah.
you're out of line.
Collateral shock.
Yeah. I'm
Enough.
hauling
no.
people to jail if you don't get this podcast thing right. That's
We're
it.
kind of like that. She's kind of like the podcast cop. So
Maybe a bit of a perfectionist, but I don't know about cop here. Now, I noticed that you're doing something different because I listened to a few of the ads that are running on your show. One of those is that you're essentially building what seems to be a network of shows that are hosted around the subject of law enforcement. And so I wanted to open the door to talking about that and really see how you're bringing it together, what shows you're excited about, and why you decided to do that.
Well, I didn't get to where I'm at by myself. I had people help me. So it's called the LET, or Law Enforcement Today Podcast Network. And I'd say 95% of the shows are first responder based. Then you have a few that are, when I say first responders, law enforcement, firefighter, you name it. Then there's other ones that are military and other ones that have nothing to do with law enforcement. And so we've started adding those. And what I try to do is give them a heads up and say, here's what you can do. There's no charge. It's free. You don't have to do ad swaps. You don't have to do anything. You don't change your hosting platform. You don't do anything. We're going to give you a space on a website. We're going to promote it on our podcast and our radio show. And that way you can help get more traffic and discoverability for your show. That rest of it is up to you. And the reality in the podcasting space, the hardest thing is discoverability. The hardest thing. Creating shows, interviewing people takes a little bit of time. Editing it takes a little bit of time. The marketing and promotion is a nonstop thing. So if you don't create the content we talked about earlier, you got nothing to give people. So create the content, but then work on discoverability. So with the LET Podcast Network, that's what we do. And if they take advantage of that, great. If they don't, well, I sleep well at night.
And they retain the rights to their shows, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. It's
Yeah.
their show. Just like my syndicated show, it's my show. I don't work for someone else. I do what I want. So on the LT Podcast Network, just say you two wanted to come on and have your show posted. Just send me an email, and I'll send you the information, and I'll put it up there. It takes me about 20 minutes to build the page. And if you benefit from the increased traffic, phenomenal. If you don't, maybe you need to look at creating content that appeals to a listener more. And that doesn't have to mean it has to be in a law enforcement space. It could be outside of it as well.
Very cool. Well, I love that. This is something that we've been looking at too. Like, how do we help others and the podcasting community reach more people? Because it's very hard to be discovered, especially if you're an independent podcaster and you're not backed by major network like iHeartMedia or Spotify or any of the others,
new
really.
noteworthy. And I don't think there is such a thing as a discoverability for podcasters. You are your brand, and you have to be putting your own sweat and tears into getting yourself discovered.
You do. It's a lot of work. It's a lot. And these networks like Wondery and these other ones where you've got to have a big show already with a big audience for they'll approach you. Listen, Spotify didn't pay, I think it's $60 million for Joe Rogan's show because no one knew of him. He already was a big show. And he was a big show because he had a lot of years of work behind it. There's another one that was sold for a ton of money, was Alex Cooper's show called Call Me Daddy or Call Her Daddy. Yeah, that was sold for a lot. That woman works hard on her show, really hard. There's other ones like Lore, Lore, which is a huge podcast. And if you ever get a chance to hear Aaron Mahnke talk, he's a great person to listen to. He calls himself an accidental podcaster.
Aaron
Huge
Mahnke?
success. Yeah.
Aaron Mahnke. Why do I know that name? I always hear
He shows up at Clubhouse periodically,
Okay.
but he's oftentimes doesn't talk. So one of the things I say is when you're in these rooms, Corinna, you're in a room, I see
on Clubhouse,
Julie
by the
in
way,
Clubhouse,
everybody.
and look at the people in the audience that are not talking and click on their bios. And some of them literally can change your world. But most people don't take the time to look for the obvious.
Yep.
True.
I completely agree. I mean, Julie and I met on Clubhouse.
Yay.
And we're changing each other's lives.
And it is about every person we meet, whether we're on Clubhouse or in real life, every single person changes your life in some manner. Every relationship changes your life in some
I learned
manner.
a lot of what to do and a lot of what not to do.
Oh, I want to hear what not to
And
do.
sometimes the what not to do is the most important in life, especially. Well, what I hear people say all the time in podcasting rooms in Clubhouse is build your authority or niche down. And while those things sound great, most of the time they heard someone else say it and they go, man, that sounds really deep and really profound. And they'll repeat it like a parrot and they have no idea what they're talking about. So, for example, my show, it started off with a very specific niche, all right, or niche, however you want to pronounce it. The minute it went to radio, I'd expanded. And here's the analogy I use. You probably heard me say this. I live in South Florida. We have Interstate 95 real close to us. It heads north and south. It's slight variations depending on where you're at. But in parts of Miami, it's 6 lanes in each direction, heading north and south. You go a couple hours north, it's 2 lanes in each direction. When I started my show, it was 2 lanes in each direction. I need to expand it to 6 lanes in each direction and still stay in the same general area. So that niche concept, and here's a person, I'm not going to get real specific. There was a person that used to be in the early days of Clubhouse would say, I don't understand why I can't get listeners. And say, what's your show about? It's about electric bicycles. Okay, then I kind of get that stuff. Then he goes, oh, no. It's about electric bicycles and not motocross or bicycle cross. So mountain electric motorcycle bikes. That's the whole show. I said, do you think you might want to put in some travel aspects and maybe increase the size of your audience? No. It's got to be about electric bicycles. It's got to be about electric, this type of bicycle in specific. Well, guess what? How many people in the world are listening to that?
5,
Yeah,
3.
not many.
Maybe. And how many of them are going to be related to you?
Yeah, my mom and dad.
Yeah.
And John J. Wiley. That's it. No, that's amazing. And I love the idea of Clubhouse, which is social audio. And that's where I not only met my business bestie, Corinna Jules, and now our newest bestie, John J. Wiley. But, there are some really great things. It's filtering out the white noise, especially on the social audio platforms, because there's a lot of people just trying to sell you things. There's nothing more maddening about those predators on social audio and social media. But John J. Wiley is not that person, 1,000%.
Now, you also have me thinking about one more thing.
One more thing.
Yes. Julie mentioned white noise and
Mhm.
teasing through the white noise in the world of podcasting. We have chosen to launch a show this next Friday, which will be Friday, April 22nd. We're going to launch a trailer for Tease. And this is a show where we introduce people to other podcasts that they might not have heard of before, or other radio shows that they might not have heard before. So our hope is that we can also procure an episode of yours to feature on the show.
Absolutely. There's so many great ones that you tell me which one you want, I'll send it to you.
All right. That sounds
Both sound
perfect.
great. We might have to pick 2, Corinna.
We might have to pick 2. We can parse them out. And thank you so much for taking this time with us today, John.
My
Yeah.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And you're celebrating everyday heroes. And in our minds, you're an everyday hero. Maybe not an everyday, but an amazing hero, doing it, serving your community, and then serving a community at large with these prolific stories. We are honored that you agreed to be a guest here on the Media Caster. So thank you, John.
Julie, Corinna, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Well, we're going to have to ask you to do 2 things for us. And
2
let's say
things.
2 words.
2 words.
Kick it.
Kick it.
Kick
Let's-
it.
Let's
Kick
kick it.
it.
Wait, do it again because I interrupted.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Kick it.
Ooh, that was
Oh,
really
that was a
good.
really good radio voice. I love it.
You have a voice for radio and a face
And a
for
face
TV.
and figure to match.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Media Casters. You can keep this conversation going and kick it with Corinna and Jules in live office hours each week. Visit themediacasters.mn.co to sign up. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe whenever you listen. Let's kick it.